Mike Tyson thought his toughest fights were over. But when his phone buzzes with an urgent call from his daughter Lila's school, everything changes. Lila was found sobbing in the school bathroom, too shaken to speak. As the truth unravels, one question remains. How far will Mike go to protect his daughter? Before continuing, let us know where are you watching from today. Also, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The sound of laughter echoed through the Tyson household, the kind of laughter that only existed in the comfort of family. Sunlight streamed through the wide living room windows, illuminating the framed photos of Mike Tyson's glory days. Pictures of championship belts and roaring crowds lined the shelves, reminders of a past he no longer chased. At 58, Mike had grown into a different man. The world still saw him as a ferocious fighter, a heavyweight legend. But here, within these walls, he was just Dad. His towering frame, still muscular and powerful, was wrapped in a loose, gray sweatshirt and black joggers. His face bore the marks of countless battles, the signature gap between his teeth often softened by a grin when Lila was near. "Daddy, catch!" Lila's voice rang out, sweet and full of joy. She threw a small purple pillow across the room, giggling as Mike made a dramatic leap to catch it. The 12-year-old's laughter bounced off the walls. Her long, dark curls framed her delicate face. Her warm brown eyes filled with a mischievous spark. She wore a lavender t-shirt with a cartoon cat on the front, and a pair of soft gray leggings. Art supplies were scattered across the coffee table, evidence of her latest masterpiece. Elena Tyson stood at the kitchen counter, watching her husband and daughter with a smile. She was elegant even in her casual clothes, a white blouse and denim jeans. Her honey-brown skin glowed under the afternoon light, her curly hair cascading past her shoulders. Despite the years, her beauty remained untouched, and the fierce determination in her eyes often reminded Mike why he'd fallen in love with her. "Lila, you're gonna make your dad sweat," Elena teased, pouring a glass of lemonade. "Never," Mike grinned, his playful growl making Lila squeal with laughter. Life was good, peaceful. The next morning, the family routine was in full swing. Lila sat at the kitchen island, nibbling on a piece of toast while Elena packed her lunch. The sound of the morning news played softly in the background, but Mike was too busy sipping his coffee and studying Lila's art to listen. She had drawn a vibrant painting of a glowing sunset over the ocean. "This is beautiful, baby girl. You really got that talent from your mama," Mike said proudly. Lila beamed, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You okay, sweetheart?" Elena asked, noticing the slight change in her daughter's demeanor. Lila hesitated, twisting the hem of her lavender hoodie. "Yeah, I'm fine, just a little nervous about school." "Nervous about?" Mike and Elena exchanged a glance. "Nervous? Why, baby?" Mike's voice was gentle, his concern evident. "It's nothing," Lila shrugged. "We have a class project coming up and Mr. Daniels keeps saying I should present first." The mention of Mr. Daniels brought a slight furrow to Mike's brow. Lila's sixth-grade teacher had a reputation for being strict, but fair. The way Lila said his name, though, there was something else, something unspoken. "You tell Mr. Daniels if he's pushing too hard. Your dad's gonna come down there and give him the old one too," Mike joked, raising his fists. Lila managed a giggle. "I will." But the laughter faded quickly. John Adams Middle School sat on the corner of a quiet neighborhood, its brick facade showing the wear of time. Inside, the halls buzzed with the chatter of students, their laughter mingling with the screech of lockers. Mr. Daniels's classroom was tucked away at the far end of the building. Bright, educational posters lined the walls, and colorful paper crafts hung from the ceiling. Mr. Daniels himself stood near the whiteboard, scribbling notes in his sharp, deliberate handwriting. He was a tall man in his late 30s, with dark, slicked-back hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Dressed in slacks and a crisp button-up shirt, He maintained an air of charm that often masked the calculating gleam in his eyes. "Good morning, class," he announced, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Settle in. We've got a lot to cover today." Lila slid into her seat, keeping her gaze low. She could feel Mr. Daniels' eyes lingering a little too long. It wasn't the first time. Every word of praise he offered her felt heavier, like a weight she couldn't shake. He always seemed too eager to single her out, to pull her into conversations that left her stomach in knots. "Lila," he called, his voice silky. "Are you ready to impress us all with your project soon? I've been telling the class how talented you are." A few students shot curious glances her way. Lila nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm still working on it." "I'm sure it'll be remarkable," he said softly. Almost too softly. The day dragged on. Lila tried to focus on her lessons, but the sense of unease never left. And when the final bell rang, relief washed over her like a wave. She hurried out, clutching her books tightly. But Mr. Daniels was waiting by the door. "Lila, could you stay for a moment?" Her heart sank. That evening, the Tyson household was unusually quiet. Lila barely touched her dinner. Mike noticed the dark circles beneath her eyes, the distant look in her gaze. "Baby girl, what's wrong?" he asked softly. Lila shook her head. "Nothing, just tired." But Mike knew better. Later that night, as Elena tucked Lila into bed, Mike lingered outside her room. He could hear the soft hum of his daughter's breathing, but the weight in his chest wouldn't lift. Something was wrong, and Mike Tyson was going to find out what. The morning sun crept through the blinds, casting streaks of gold across the Tyson family's modest but comfortable home. The day should have started like any other, but Mike couldn't shake the unease that had lingered since the night before. Downstairs, the aroma of bacon and scrambled eggs filled the air as Elena worked in the kitchen. She moved with practiced grace, humming softly to herself. Despite the warmth of the scene, a subtle tension lingered. Mike entered, his broad frame nearly filling the doorway. He gave Elena a soft kiss on the forehead, but his eyes held a distant look. "Lila's still asleep?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Elena nodded. "She said she wasn't feeling well. I thought I'd let her rest." Mike frowned. "She wasn't sick yesterday." Elena hesitated. "I know. Maybe it's just stress from school. You saw how quiet she was last night." He nodded, but the nagging worry in his chest only grew. Lila had always been a joyful child, creative, kind, and full of life. But lately, something had dimmed that light. The way she avoided eye contact, how her laughter had grown forced. Mike wasn't the type to ignore his instincts. And right now, they were screaming. By late morning, Lila had come downstairs, still clad in her pajamas. Her face was pale, her curls slightly disheveled. She picked at her breakfast, barely eating. "How you feelin', baby girl?" Mike asked gently, crouching beside her. "I'm okay," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the table. But she wasn't okay. Mike could see it. "Lila," he tried again, his voice low and steady. "Did something happen at school?" She froze. It was subtle, but he saw the flicker of fear cross her face. "No, Daddy, it's just school stuff, projects and tests." She forced a smile. "I'll be fine." Mike wanted to press further, but he knew better than to push. He nodded, brushing a stray curl from her face. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" She nodded, though her eyes remained distant. Later that day, Mike made a decision. He wasn't one to sit idle when it came to his family. After making a quick call to the school, he drove down the familiar streets of their neighborhood. John Adams Middle School was bustling with midday activity. Kids played on the basketball courts, while others lingered by the vending machines. But as Mike walked through the front doors, the hum of laughter and chatter faded. The school's administrative office was bright and sterile. A young receptionist greeted him with a polite smile, though the weight of recognition settled on her face. "Mr. Tyson, what a surprise! How can we help you?" "I'd like to speak to Principal Thompson," Mike said, his voice calm but firm. Within minutes, Principal Thompson emerged from his office. A tall man in his early 50s, with silver hair and a sharp suit, he greeted Mike with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Tyson, always a pleasure. Please come in." Mike followed him into the office, the door clicking shut behind them. The walls were lined with student achievement awards and framed photos of past events. Principal Thompson gestured to a chair, but Mike remained standing. "I'm here about my daughter, Lila," Mike said directly. "She hasn't been herself lately. I'm concerned something's going on." Principal Thompson adjusted his tie, a thin smile plastered across his face. "Lila is an exceptional student, Mr. Tyson. Straight A's, wonderful creativity. Mr. Daniels often praises her work." "Yeah?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "Funny thing is, she's been coming home quiet, nervous, and now she's sick out of nowhere." The principal's expression faltered. "Well, I assure you, we take the well-being of our students very seriously. But I haven't received any reports of concern from Lila or her teachers." Mike leaned closer, his voice low. "Maybe she's too scared to say anything." Principal Thompson's smile wavered. "If you'd like, I can set up a meeting with Mr. Daniels to address your concerns." Mike held his gaze for a long moment. "Yeah, let's do that." The following afternoon, Mike returned to the school. This time, Lila came with him, her small hand tightly clutching his. She wore a faded denim jacket over her lavender dress, the shadows under her eyes more pronounced. Mr. Daniels greeted them with an exaggerated warmth, his broad smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Mr. Tyson, Lila, it's so wonderful to see you both," he said, his voice smooth and calculated. "Please have a seat." Mike remained standing. "We're fine. I'm just here to get a few things straight." The teacher's smile didn't waver. "Of course, how can I help?" Mike glanced down at Lila, then back at Daniels. "Lila says you've been giving her extra attention, singling her out, pushing her to present first in class. Why's that?" Mr. Daniels chuckled softly. "Lila is an exceptionally bright student. I believe in encouraging my students to reach their full potential." "That so?" Mike's voice was low. "But it seems like maybe you're encouraging a little too much." The air grew thick. Mr. Daniels' smile faltered, if only for a second. "I assure you, Mr. Tyson, I hold all my students to the same standard. I'm deeply invested in their growth." Mike's fists clenched. "Just remember, I'm deeply invested in my daughter's safety, and I don't miss a damn thing." The tension was palpable. Mr. Daniels quickly nodded, his demeanor shifting into one of forced compliance. "Understood." Mike placed a protective hand on Lila's shoulder. "Good, 'cause I'll be watching." That night, Lila curled up beside Mike on the couch, her small frame tucked into his side. She hadn't said much since the meeting, but the way she held onto him spoke volumes. Mike kissed the top of her head, his voice soft. "I got you, baby girl. Always." But deep inside, the storm was far from over, and Mike Tyson wasn't done. The sun had barely risen when Mike found himself pacing the living room. The tension from the meeting with Mr. Daniels still lingered. Every instinct told him that something wasn't right. Elena sat on the couch, her coffee growing cold in her hands. "You don't think he's, actually dangerous, do you?" Mike's jaw tightened. "I don't trust him, not one bit. Something's off, and I'm gonna find out what." Elena nodded slowly, concern etched on her face. "Just be careful, Mike. We both know what happens when people like us start asking too many questions." Mike didn't need the reminder. He'd fought battles in and out of the ring, but nothing compared to the fight against the system, a system that often protected the wrong people. "I'll be careful," he promised, "but I'm not going to stand by and let anything happen to Lila." That afternoon, Mike decided to take a different approach. He parked his black SUV across the street from the school, his eyes fixed on the front entrance. Parents came and went, kids laughed and played, but Mike's focus never wavered. Hours passed. Then, at precisely 3:15 p.m., Mr. Daniels emerged. He was dressed sharply in a navy blue blazer, his leather briefcase swinging by his side. But it wasn't his polished appearance that caught Mike's attention. It was the way he scanned his surroundings, calculated, almost paranoid. Mike's brow furrowed. "What are you hiding?" He waited a moment, then pulled out onto the road, keeping a safe distance as Daniel's silver sedan headed toward the outskirts of town. The teacher didn't head toward the suburban neighborhoods or the bustling downtown. Instead, he took a turn down a narrow, poorly lit road. Mike's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Where the hell are you going?" After several miles, Daniels finally pulled into a secluded lot. A large, decrepit warehouse loomed in the distance. The building's rusted exterior and shattered windows told a story of abandonment. But the faint hum of activity betrayed its appearance. Mike parked a safe distance away, watching as Daniels stepped out of his car. He greeted a burly man in a black jacket, exchanging a few words before disappearing inside. "Damn," Mike muttered under his breath. He knew better than to rush in. This wasn't just a teacher's side errand. Something deeper was at play. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed. "Detective Martinez," a gravelly voice answered on the other end. "Tyson? What's going on?" "I need a favor, quiet one." There was a brief pause. "I'm listening." Mike returned home long after the sun had set. Lila was already in bed, her soft breathing a reminder of why he couldn't back down. Elena waited for him at the kitchen table, worry etched into every line on her face. "What did you find?" Mike hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Daniels isn't who he seems. He's involved in something bad. I got Martinez looking into it." Elena's voice wavered. "And what if this gets dangerous?" Mike met her gaze, his voice unwavering. "Then I'll do what I have to do. No one's hurting our baby." As the house grew silent, Mike sat by Lila's bedside. Her small hand rested against her stuffed bunny, the same one she'd carried since she was a toddler. He brushed a curl from her forehead, his heart heavy. "I got you, baby girl. Always." But as the shadows of the night crept across the room, Mike knew one thing for certain. The fight had only just begun. The next morning, Mike awoke with a renewed sense of determination. The memory of Daniel's shady warehouse meeting lingered, gnawing at his thoughts. He knew he couldn't rely solely on Detective Martinez, not when Lila's safety was on the line. Elena was already up, frying eggs in the kitchen. The rhythmic sizzle filled the room, but her usual warmth was absent. She caught Mike's glance and forced a small smile. "You didn't sleep much," she said softly. "Neither did you," he replied, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Lila shuffled into the kitchen, still in her pink pajamas. Her eyes lit up momentarily when she saw her dad. "Morning, Daddy." Mike crouched down, opening his arms. She ran to him, burying her face in his chest. Her small frame still trembled with traces of fear. "Morning, baby girl," he whispered. "You feeling any better?" She nodded weakly, though Mike could see the weight she carried. "I was thinking maybe we could paint today," he suggested, forcing a smile. "You could teach me how to make those sunsets you're always talking about." Lila's face brightened, just for a moment. "Okay." After breakfast, Mike pulled out his phone and dialed Detective Martinez. The line clicked almost immediately. "Mike, I've been meaning to call you." What did you find? Mike's voice was low, steady. It's not good, Martinez said, his tone grim. That warehouse Daniels went to? It's linked to a series of reports, suspected drug activity, trafficking rumors. But here's the catch. Every investigation has been shut down before it got anywhere. Mike clenched his jaw. Who's protecting him? That's what I'm trying to find out, Martinez sighed on the other end. Look, Mike, Daniels isn't just a predator. He's connected. I'm going to keep digging, but you need to be careful. Men like him don't go down without a fight. I'm not afraid of a fight, Mike growled. Just find me what I need. Later that day, Mike drove to the school, his heart pounding. He wasn't here for answers. He was here to send a message. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he stormed into the front office. The receptionist looked up, startled. Mr. Tyson, I need to see Principal Thompson, now. Moments later, Principal Thompson appeared, his forced smile barely masking his discomfort. Mr. Tyson, I wasn't expecting you. Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting my daughter to come home terrified every day. Thompson gestured to his office. Why don't we talk privately? Mike followed, the door closing behind them. Your teacher, Daniels, Mike began, his voice low but commanding. I know he's not just some beloved educator. I know what he's into. Thompson's smile faltered. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Tyson. Don't play dumb with me, Mike growled. My daughter told me everything, and I saw him last night. The warehouse. The people he's meeting. You've been covering for him, haven't you? Thompson's eyes flickered with fear before hardening. You have no proof. Mike leaned in, his presence overpowering. Not yet, but I will, and when I do, you'll go down with him. The principal's composure crumbled. He fumbled for words but found none. Get out, he finally hissed. Mike straightened, his fists trembling with restrained anger. This isn't over. That evening, while Mike was helping Lila mix her paints, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello? A hesitant voice answered. Mr. Tyson? Who's this? My name is Claire, the woman paused. My daughter went to this school. She had Mr. Daniels too. Mike's blood ran cold. What happened to her? She's been too scared to talk about it. But when I heard about Lila, I knew I had to reach out. I think we can help each other. Mike's jaw clenched. Where can we meet? The park, tomorrow afternoon. As the call ended, Mike knew one thing for certain. The cracks in Daniel's facade were growing, and soon, the whole rotten truth would come crashing down. The following afternoon, Mike sat in his truck, parked along the edge of Riverbend Park. It was a sunny day, but the brightness did little to ease the weight in his chest. Across the green field, families gathered for picnics, laughter echoing in the breeze. But Mike's eyes stayed fixed on the path ahead, searching. Then he saw her. Claire approached slowly, a petite woman with dark curly hair that framed her tired face. She wore a faded gray sweater and jeans, the kind of clothes that suggested a life lived quietly, without much choice. A teenage girl trailed behind her. She looked around Lila's age, with deep brown eyes and long braids. But there was something hollow in her gaze, a painful familiarity that Mike recognized instantly. He stepped out of his truck. Claire gave a small, uncertain nod. Mr. Tyson. Just Mike, he said softly. Thank you for coming. The girl shifted closer to her mother, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Mike knelt to her level. Hi, sweetheart, I'm Lila's dad. She didn't respond, but Claire gently rubbed her back. This is my daughter, Naomi, Claire explained. She's been through a lot. Mike's heart clenched. He could only imagine the horror Naomi had endured. I'm so sorry, he said sincerely. But you're not alone. I promise you that, Claire nodded, her voice trembling. I know. That's why I'm here. They found a shaded bench, the hum of distant chatter providing a layer of privacy. Claire hesitated before speaking, her hands trembling. "Naomi was in Daniel's class last year," she began. "At first, he seemed normal, kind even. He praised her in front of the class, said she was special. She wanted to believe him." Mike's jaw tightened. The pattern was all too familiar. "But then," Claire continued, her voice breaking, "he started asking her to stay after school. He'd find reasons, extra tutoring, special projects. I trusted him." Naomi flinched as her mother spoke, her eyes fixed on the ground. "He got bolder," Claire said bitterly. "The compliments turned into touching. Little things at first. A hand on her shoulder, brushing hair from her face. Then it got worse." Mike's hands curled into fists, the rage simmering just beneath the surface. "She finally told me," Claire whispered, tears streaming. "But when I went to the school, Principal Thompson called it a misunderstanding. Said Daniels was just passionate about his students." "They protected him," Mike growled. Claire nodded. "We moved Naomi to another school, but no charges, no investigation, just silence." Mike's chest heaved. The system had failed Naomi, just as it had tried to fail Lila. "You're brave," he told Naomi gently, "and I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you or any other kid again." For the first time, Naomi's eyes flickered with something like hope. That evening, Mike sat at the dining table, the room dimly lit. Elena poured herself a cup of tea, her eyes heavy with worry. "Claire wasn't the only one," Mike said grimly. "I called Martinez. He found 3 other parents who tried to report Daniels. Same story. Nothing was done." Elena shook her head, her voice tight. "How many more are there?" Mike's eyes burned. "Too many." He paced the room, his thoughts racing. The weight of it all, the corruption, the cover-ups, threatened to consume him. But then Elena's voice cut through the storm. "You're doing the right thing," she said firmly. "And you're not alone." Mike's gaze softened as he looked at his wife. Her strength had always been his anchor. "We're going to bring him down," he vowed. "Not just Daniels, all of them." And for the first time in days, Mike felt something more powerful than rage. Resolve. The next morning, Mike stood in the middle of his living room, scrolling through the contact list on his phone. The conversation with Claire had rattled him, but it also fueled his determination. He couldn't let Daniel slip away again. Lila was still asleep upstairs, curled under her pink blankets. Elena had made her blueberry pancakes for breakfast, but Lila had barely touched them. Every day, the light in her eyes seemed dimmer. That was why Mike had to act. He dialed a number, his jaw set tight. "Detective Martinez." The voice on the other end answered quickly. "Mike, what's the update?" "There are others," Mike said, pacing. "Claire Thompson's daughter, a girl named Naomi. Daniels went after her last year. The school covered it up." Martinez cursed under his breath. "Same pattern. God damn it." "We need a public case," Mike growled. "No more brushing this under the rug." Martinez's voice hardened. "We'll build it. But we'll need evidence. Real, undeniable evidence." Mike nodded, though the detective couldn't see him. "I'll get it," he vowed. Later that afternoon, Mike found himself in the back room of a local community center. The walls were plastered with faded posters for youth programs, and the air smelled faintly of stale coffee. But the room was filled with something more potent: resolve. Around the scratched wooden table sat Claire, Naomi, and 3 other parents. Each face told its own story of heartbreak and frustration. A father with graying hair clenched his fists. A mother in a worn jacket blinked back tears. They had all tried to fight, only to be ignored. "Thank you for coming," Mike said, his voice steady. "I know how hard this is, but we're not alone, and we're not powerless." Claire nodded, her hand resting protectively on Naomi's shoulder. "We're here because they failed us," she said. "But we won't let them fail anyone else." The father, Mark, spoke next. "They moved Daniels to our school 3 years ago. My daughter was 12. She told me he made her stay after class just like Naomi. But when I went to Principal Thompson, they made it sound like I was overreacting." Mike's teeth clenched. "That's how they operate. Silence the victims, protect their own." "But not anymore," Claire said firmly. With the parents' agreement, Mike and Martinez devised a strategy. Martinez would discreetly investigate, looking for any internal reports or suppressed complaints. The parents would provide statements detailing the abuse and the school's negligence. Mike, with his platform, would ensure the story reached the public, loud and clear. "They'll try to discredit us," Martinez warned. "Especially you, Mike. They'll call you aggressive, say you're using your fame to bully the school." Mike's expression remained unyielding. "Let them. I'm not afraid of the fight." That evening, Mike found Lila curled up in the corner of the couch, her sketchpad resting on her lap. She'd been drawing more lately, delicate images of flowers and rain, as if trying to express what she couldn't say. Mike sat beside her, his large frame sinking into the cushions. "Hey, baby girl," he said softly. "I want to talk to you about something." Lila lowered her pencil. Her eyes searched his face, cautious. "I spoke to some other parents," Mike continued. "There are other girls like you. Girls who were hurt by Mr. Daniels." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the sketchpad. "They're brave," Mike said gently. "And so are you." Lila's voice trembled. "But what if no one believes us?" Mike reached for her hand, his warmth steadying her. "They will," he promised, "because we're going to make them listen." Lila hesitated, then nodded. A spark of courage flickered behind her tearful eyes. "Okay," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, Mike saw a glimpse of the fierce, resilient girl he knew. And in that moment, he knew that together, they would see justice served. The following week, Mike Tyson stood before the heavy oak doors of the district's administrative building. The beige walls and fluorescent lights inside gave the place a cold, sterile feel, a stark contrast to the burning determination in his chest. Elena squeezed his hand. "We're with you," she whispered. Behind them stood Claire, Mark, Naomi, and the other parents, united in their resolve. Detective Martinez was also present, though he remained near the back, observing. "They won't ignore us today," Mike said, his voice low but firm. With that, he pushed open the doors. The school boardroom was packed. Rows of chairs lined the walls, filled with concerned parents, reporters, and even a few students. The school boardroom was packed. Rows of chairs lined the walls, filled with concerned parents, reporters, and even a few students. At the front of the room sat a long, polished table where 7 board members waited. Principal Thompson was already seated, his thin lips pressed into a tight line. Next to him was the superintendent, a wiry man in a navy suit who avoided making eye contact with Mike. "Mr. Tyson," the superintendent began, adjusting his tie, "we understand your concerns. However, we'd like to maintain decorum." "Decorum?" Mike's voice rumbled, the weight of his words filling the room. "My daughter was harassed. These parents' children were harassed. And you're worried about decorum?" The room fell silent. "We conducted a thorough internal investigation," Thompson interjected, his tone cold. "There was no evidence of wrongdoing by Mr. Daniels. These accusations are deeply troubling and, quite frankly, unfair." Mike's eyes narrowed. "Unfair? You moved him from school to school. Every time there was a complaint, you covered it up." Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "That's not true. We followed protocol." "No," Claire said, stepping forward. You followed a system designed to protect men like Daniels, not our daughters." Martinez cleared his throat, raising a file for all to see. "This is your protocol," he said firmly. "These are the reports you ignored. Emails from teachers concerned about Daniel's behavior. Parents' complaints that mysteriously disappeared. You didn't just fail these kids. You enabled a predator." He handed copies of the documents to each board member. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they read the damning evidence. "You knew," Mike growled. "And you let it happen." Thompson's face drained of color. The superintendent stammered, These allegations will be investigated further." "No," Mike interrupted. "You don't get to investigate yourselves anymore. We're taking this public. Every single one of you will be held accountable." The flash of cameras ignited as reporters scribbled down notes. The board members fidgeted, realizing they were losing control. Just as the tension reached its peak, the door opened once more. Lila stepped inside. She was small, barely able to see over the rows of adults, but her presence was commanding. Her pink sweater seemed to swallow her tiny frame, but her chin was lifted in defiance. Mike's breath caught. "Lila," he whispered. She looked at him for reassurance, then turned to the board. "I want to say something," she said softly. The room hushed. "He made me feel scared," Lila said, her voice trembling but steady. "He said things that made me feel wrong, and no one believed me. But my dad did." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "He's my hero," Lila continued, "because he fought for me. And now I'm not scared anymore." The crowd erupted in applause. Some parents openly wept. The board members had nothing left to say. By the end of the day, the superintendent announced Mr. Daniels's immediate termination. An independent investigation into the district's handling of the case was launched. But for Mike, it wasn't just about the investigation. It was about ensuring no other child endured what Lila had. "We're not done," he told the reporters. "There are other victims, other parents who deserve justice, and we'll keep fighting until they get it." Lila, standing proudly beside her father, smiled for the first time in weeks. The fight wasn't over, but together, they had taken the first step. The fallout from the school board confrontation was swift and chaotic. The story made headlines within hours, with news outlets plastering the Tyson family's faces across their screens. Some praised Mike as a hero, while others questioned his aggressive approach. The media latched onto every detail, spinning the narrative from all angles. Mike didn't care. He had one focus: Lila. Mike paced the living room, the glow of the television illuminating the walls. News anchors debated the case, and footage of Lila's trembling voice at the board meeting replayed on a loop. "Turn it off," Elena said softly from the kitchen. He hesitated, the screen flickering with a headline. "Mike Tyson's rage resurfaces. Did the former boxer go too far?" With a growl of frustration, he jabbed the remote. The screen went black. "They always try to make me the monster," Mike muttered. Elena crossed the room, placing a gentle hand on his chest. "Let them talk," she said firmly. "The truth is out, and Lila knows she's safe." He nodded, though the tension in his shoulders remained. Lila sat on the floor of her room, crayons scattered around her as she colored. Her drawings had always been vibrant, but now her strokes seemed softer, more uncertain. Mike knocked gently. "Hey, baby girl." She looked up, her eyes weary. "Hi, Daddy." He sat beside her, watching as she shaded the sky in shades of purple. "You okay?" he asked. She shrugged. "People at school, they keep whispering. Some say I lied. Others say I was brave. I don't know what to think." Mike's chest tightened. "You told the truth," he said firmly. "That's what matters, and I'm proud of you." Lila's lip quivered. but she nodded. I'm glad you believed me. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I always will. While the Tyson family found solace at home, the outside world was divided. Parents from other schools came forward, revealing their own stories of misconduct that had been swept under the rug. Protests erupted outside the district office, demanding accountability. But not everyone stood with Mike. A new segment aired, featuring a former colleague of Mr. Daniels. He was a dedicated teacher, the man insisted. This feels like a witch hunt. Online, comments poured in. Mike Tyson just wants attention. He's using his daughter for publicity. Where's the evidence? Elena slammed her phone down. These people don't know anything. Let them talk, Mike said calmly. The truth will come out. But even as he spoke, Detective Martinez's words echoed in his mind. This wasn't just about Mr. Daniels. Someone covered for him. Someone let this happen. And Mike wasn't going to stop until he found out who. The next morning, Mike sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the thin stack of files Detective Martinez had handed him. The evidence against Mr. Daniels was damning. Emails from concerned parents, disciplinary warnings, and internal memos swept under the rug. But what disturbed Mike the most was how long it had gone on. 3 years, he muttered. 3 damn years, and they let him stay. Elena, pouring a cup of coffee, shook her head. And those parents, they tried to speak up, but nothing changed. Mike's jaw tightened. He wasn't just fighting for Lila. He was fighting for every child those people failed. Martinez said someone's protecting Daniels, Mike said. But who? Later that afternoon, Mike met Detective Martinez at a small diner outside the city. The detective's short, graying hair was slicked back, and his sharp eyes scanned the room out of habit. I've been digging, Martinez said, sliding a folder across the table. The district's superintendent, Charles Whitmore. He's been quietly settling complaints like Daniels for years. Pays off families, threatens legal action if they speak out. Mike frowned. Why? Reputation, Martinez said flatly. Whitmore gets bonuses for keeping the district's image clean. Every scandal swept under the rug means more money in his pocket. Mike clenched his fists. So Daniels got free rein and Whitmore got rich. Exactly. But then Martinez lowered his voice. And it's not just him. Martinez explained how Daniels' behavior was well known within the school. Teachers had reported his inappropriate comments. Parents had complained. Even a few students had written anonymous letters. But nothing was done. Whitmore has people inside, Martinez said. Teachers and staff who look the other way. They're afraid to lose their jobs if they speak out. Mike shook his head in disbelief. All those people, they knew. And they did nothing. Martinez nodded. It's a system built to protect itself, but we can bring it down. Mike's mind raced as they discussed the next steps. We go public, Martinez said. Expose Whitmore and the school board, but we'll need solid evidence. What about Daniels? Mike asked. He's not going to stay quiet. Martinez's lips curled into a grim smile. He won't have a choice. I've got people watching him. Mike nodded, determination burning in his eyes. I'm not letting them get away with this. That evening, as Mike tucked Lila into bed, she reached for his hand. Are they going to hurt you, Daddy? She whispered. His heart ached at the fear in her voice. No, baby girl, he said softly. Nobody's going to hurt us. I promise, Lila nodded. But Mike saw the lingering worry in her eyes. He kissed her forehead and watched as she drifted to sleep. I'm going to fix this, he whispered. Because for Lila, and every child like her, he had to. The following morning, Mike stood by the window, the soft hum of traffic from the street below barely registering. His phone buzzed on the counter, another missed call from an unknown number. They'd been coming in all night. Threats, he muttered, shaking his head. Cowards. Elena watched him from the kitchen, her face tense. They're scared. That means you're doing something right. But Mike knew the danger wasn't just empty words. Whitmore had resources, lawyers, media contacts, even city officials in his pocket. And then there was Daniels. Men like him didn't go down without a fight. I have to be careful, Mike said, more to himself than anyone. But I'm not backing down. Mike met Detective Martinez at a secluded parking lot behind an old hardware store. Martinez, dressed in a dark leather jacket, leaned against his car, flipping through a thick folder. We've got more, he said, holding it up. 3 additional complaints. 2 from former students, 1 from a staff member. All ignored. Mike's stomach turned. And Whitmore? We traced the payoffs, Martinez said, voice low. Private accounts, shady lawyers. He's been covering tracks for years. Mike shook his head. We have to go public. We will, Martinez assured him. But we need Daniels to slip up. He's the weak link. That afternoon, Mike returned to the school. The atmosphere was tense. Staff whispered as he passed, their eyes darting away. Principal Thompson waited in the main office, her thin smile betraying her discomfort. Mr. Tyson, she greeted. To what do we owe the pleasure? Mike didn't bother with small talk. Where's Daniels? Thompson's smile faltered. Mr. Daniels is on temporary leave. Temporary? Mike's voice hardened. After everything he's done, Thompson's gaze shifted. There's an ongoing investigation. We must follow protocol. Your protocol is protecting a predator, Mike shot back. Before she could respond, the door to the office swung open. Mr. Daniels stepped inside, his face pale. The man avoided Mike's glare, but the tension was unbearable. You shouldn't be here, Daniels muttered. Mike took a step forward. Neither should you. Daniels' hands trembled, but he forced a smirk. You have no proof. All you have is gossip. Mike's voice was low and steady. Not for long. Later that evening, Mike sat across from a local reporter in a small recording studio. The woman, mid-30s with sharp eyes, nodded as the cameras rolled. Mr. Tyson, why are you speaking out now? Mike leaned forward, his voice unwavering. Because my daughter and other kids like her deserve to be safe. People in power covered for a predator, and I'm not going to let that continue. The reporter nodded. You're taking on some powerful people. Aren't you worried about retaliation? Mike's jaw clenched. Let them try. The camera's light flickered as the interview wrapped. Mike knew the storm was coming, but this time he was ready. The day after the interview aired, the backlash was immediate. News channels picked up the story, and the headlines spread like wildfire. Mike Tyson accuses school of covering up abuse. Beloved teacher under investigation. Principal Whitmore faces allegations of corruption. But with the public support came the hate. Online threats flooded Mike's social media. Some called him a liar, accusing him of seeking attention. Others demanded he let it go for the sake of the school's reputation. Still, Mike stood firm. Lila, however, wasn't as resilient. She stayed curled up on the couch, clutching her sketchbook like a shield. Every time the TV mentioned her father's name, her small body tensed. Elena sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. You don't have to watch this, baby, Lila shook her head. I hate that people think Daddy's lying. The truth will come out, Elena promised, and we'll get through this together. But Lila's eyes remained downcast. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniels stayed hidden behind the walls of his modest apartment. Empty fast food containers littered the floor. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the endless news articles. They're tearing me apart, he whispered. That stupid girl. And Tyson. A knock at the door jolted him. His heart pounded. Was it the police? The media? He cracked the door open, and Principal Whitmore stepped inside, his face etched with frustration. "You promised me this would stay quiet," Whitmore hissed. "Now Tyson's dragging us through the mud." "It's not my fault," Daniel stammered. "They're believing her. That girl twisted everything." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "We can still fix this, but you need to stay out of sight. No more interviews, no more statements." Daniels nodded, but fear gnawed at him. He knew the walls were closing in. Later that night, Mike sat on the back porch, staring out at the darkened sky. Elena joined him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "They're afraid of you," she whispered. "That's why they're fighting so hard." Mike nodded. "I'm not stopping. Not until Daniels and Whitmore are held accountable." A sudden vibration from his phone broke the silence. It was a message from Detective Martinez. "We've got something. Meet me first thing tomorrow." Mike's heart pounded. The truth was closer than ever. The following morning, Mike arrived at the precinct. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Detective Martinez led him into a small conference room. Stacks of folders cluttered the table, but one laptop stood open, its screen paused on a surveillance video. "What is it?" Mike asked, his voice low. Martinez motioned toward the screen. "We pulled this from the school's security system. Took some digging to get it. They weren't exactly cooperative." Mike's jaw tightened. "Show me." Martinez pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The hallway was empty except for Lila, clutching her notebook as she walked toward her classroom. From the corner of the frame, Mr. Daniels appeared. He smiled, placing a hand on Lila's shoulder. Her body stiffened. "Look at her," Martinez said. "She freezes up." Daniels leaned in, saying something to Lila. She nodded quickly, her eyes darting around. The timestamp in the corner confirmed it was the same day she'd been found crying in the bathroom. Then, another piece of footage appeared. This time it was after school. Lila stood near the main doors, waiting to be picked up. Daniels approached her again, blocking her view of the exit. "We enhanced the audio," Martinez said, clicking a button. Daniels' voice came through, cold and calculating. "You're not going to tell anyone, are you? You wouldn't want your daddy to get upset. That might make things worse." Mike's fists clenched, his knuckles turning white. He could barely breathe. "We got him," Martinez said. "But that's not all." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were statements from other parents, girls who had faced Daniel's harassment but were too afraid to speak. Until now. "They're ready to come forward," Martinez continued. "We're filing charges today." Mike's eyes burned. Relief, anger, and sorrow tangled inside him. "And Whitmore? We're building a case against him too." He knew Mike. He covered for Daniels for years. Hours later, Martinez led a team of officers to the school. News cameras swarmed the entrance as reporters shouted questions. Inside, Principal Whitmore stood behind his polished mahogany desk. He flinched when the officers entered, his hands trembling. "Principal Whitmore," Martinez said, her voice firm. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, child endangerment, and failure to report sexual misconduct." Whitmore sputtered. "You can't do this. I was protecting the school's reputation." "You were protecting a predator," Martinez snapped, "and you let it happen over and over again." As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Whitmore's face crumpled. The cameras outside captured the moment, broadcasting it across the nation. That evening, Mike knelt by Lila's bedside. She hugged her stuffed rabbit tightly, her eyes wide with questions. "Is Mr. Daniels gone?" she whispered. Mike nodded. "He won't hurt anyone ever again." Lila's eyes filled with tears. But this time, they weren't from fear. She buried her face against her father's chest, her small arms wrapping tightly around him. "You're my hero, Daddy." Mike's voice broke as he whispered, "And you're mine, baby girl." The fight wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, and long days ahead. But for now, Lila was safe, and Mike would make sure she always would be. The day of the arraignment arrived swiftly. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, families, and members of the community filled every seat. Mike sat in the front row, his broad shoulders squared, his fists clenched. Lila stayed home, too young to witness what was about to unfold. On the other side of the room, Mr. Daniels entered in handcuffs. His polished appearance had faded. His eyes darted nervously, no longer the confident teacher who had manipulated his way through the system. Principal Whitmore followed soon after, his face pale. He avoided Mike's glare, keeping his head down. The weight of public shame already bore heavily on him. "All rise," the bailiff announced as the judge entered. Judge Evelyn Harper, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, took her seat. She'd built a reputation for her no-nonsense approach to justice. Mike prayed she'd live up to it. "We are here today for the arraignment of Mr. Thomas Daniels and Principal Gregory Whitmore," she began. "The charges are as follows: criminal sexual conduct, endangering the welfare of a minor, and obstruction of justice." Daniels' lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mike's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Principal Whitmore's attorney followed, issuing the same plea. "Not guilty?" Mike whispered under his breath, his voice trembling with disbelief. Detective Martinez leaned in. "It's typical. They'll deny everything." "But we have the evidence, Mike. They won't get away with it." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved into faces. "Mr. Tyson, do you believe justice will be served?" "How is your daughter coping with all of this?" Mike paused, his massive frame towering over the press. His voice was steady, but the emotion behind it was undeniable. "My daughter is strong," he said. "She didn't deserve what happened to her. No child does. And I'll make sure the people responsible face the consequences." His words echoed through news stations that evening. Some praised him for his courage. Others criticized him, accusing him of using his celebrity status to pressure the system. But Mike didn't care. He wasn't fighting for public approval. He was fighting for Lila. In the days that followed, Martinez and the prosecution worked tirelessly. Witnesses were called, and other victims' stories came to light. Girls who had stayed silent out of fear now found the strength to speak. "He told me I was special," one young woman testified, "that I shouldn't tell anyone or I'd ruin his career." Another former student added, "I reported it, but Principal Whitmore said it was my word against his. Nothing ever happened." Their testimonies shattered the image Daniels had carefully crafted. His charm, his influence, it all unraveled. At home, Lila slowly began to heal. She returned to her art, the vibrant colors of her paintings reflecting her resilience. One afternoon, as Mike watched her brush soft strokes onto the canvas, she asked quietly, "Will I have to see him again?" Mike knelt beside her. "No, baby. You're safe now. And if you ever feel scared, I'm right here." She nodded, her small hand slipping into his. "I believe you, Daddy." The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as the trial commenced. Mike sat in the front row with Elena, their hands intertwined. Detective Martinez gave him a reassuring nod from the witness stand, ready to testify when called. The prosecutor, a determined woman named Rachel Porter, adjusted her glasses and prepared her opening statement. The judge's gavel struck, calling the court to order. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Rachel began, her voice calm but firm. "Today, you will hear evidence that will expose a pattern of manipulation, abuse, and institutional failure. Mr. Thomas Daniels, a man entrusted with the education and care of children, used his position to harm those most vulnerable. And Principal Gregory Whitmore, instead of protecting these children, chose to protect the school's reputation. Mike clenched his jaw as she continued. Every word reopened the wounds Lila had suffered, but he remained composed. For her. The defense attorney, Alan Reed, a sharp-tongued man with a reputation for aggressive tactics, wasted no time in his rebuttal. "This case is nothing more than a calculated attack on a respected educator," he said, gesturing toward Daniels. "My client is a victim of false accusations fueled by hysteria and the media's influence. And as for Principal Whitmore, he acted within his responsibilities to maintain order within the school." Mike's fists tightened. The audacity of their defense was infuriating. The prosecution called their first witness, a former student named Grace Mitchell. She was now 17, her voice trembling as she recounted the incidents. "He would always find reasons to keep me after class," she said, avoiding Daniel's gaze. "He said I was special, and if I told anyone, I'd regret it." Rachel nodded, offering her a reassuring smile. "Grace, did you report this to anyone?" Grace hesitated. "I told Principal Whitmore. He said I misunderstood Mr. Daniels' intentions and that I should be grateful for his guidance." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Mike felt a pang of anger, remembering how Lila had been silenced the same way. Reed, however, was quick to pounce. "Miss Mitchell, isn't it true that you received poor grades in Mr. Daniels' class? Perhaps this accusation is merely an attempt to retaliate." Grace's eyes welled with tears. "Number, I'm telling the truth." Mike's knuckles went white. The defense's strategy was clear. Discredit the victims, paint them as liars. Back home, the trial consumed Mike. He tossed and turned at night, haunted by the testimonies. Elena noticed the storm brewing within him. "Mike, you can't carry all of this alone," she said softly one evening, brushing a hand through his hair. He exhaled sharply. "I just keep thinking, what if we hadn't caught him? What if Lila hadn't told us? There could have been more girls." Elena cupped his face. "But she did tell us. And because of that, others found the courage to speak up. You're protecting her, Mike. And you're giving those girls a voice." Her words grounded him. He kissed her forehead, the tension easing slightly. The next day, Mike received a note from Lila. She had written it in her careful handwriting, folding it neatly before slipping it under his pillow. "Daddy, I know the trial is hard, but I'm not scared anymore because I know you're fighting for me. And even though Mr. Daniels tried to hurt me, he didn't win. You did. You're my hero. Love, Lila." Tears welled in Mike's eyes as he read it. The letter reminded him why he was enduring this battle. It wasn't just for Lila. It was for every child who had suffered in silence. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, as Rachel Porter called her next witness. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls Michael Gerard Tyson to the stand." Mike straightened his shoulders, adjusted his suit jacket, and stood. The whispers in the courtroom swelled as the iconic former boxer made his way to the witness stand. He could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him, but his gaze remained steady. He wasn't there as a celebrity. He was there as Lila's father. After swearing the oath, Mike faced Rachel. "Mr. Tyson," she began, her voice calm, "can you tell us why you're here today?" Mike's jaw clenched. "I'm here because my daughter was hurt, and I'm here to make sure no other kid goes through what she did." Rachel nodded. "Tell us about Lila. What was she like before all this?" Mike's face softened at the thought of his little girl. "She's bright, loves to draw and paint. Always singing around the house. She used to talk about school all the time, about her friends, her art projects. But then she stopped." His voice wavered, but he didn't break. "She became quiet, afraid. I knew something was wrong, but she was too scared to tell me. Rachel allowed the moment to settle before continuing. And when she finally did tell you, Mike's eyes darkened. She said Mr. Daniels had been making her uncomfortable, touching her, saying things no teacher should ever say to a child. Alan Reed stood, straightening his tie. "Mr. Tyson," he began, a forced smile curling his lips. "You're a man known for your temper, correct?" Mike's expression remained unreadable. "I've had my moments, but I'm not the man I used to be," Reed nodded. "And yet, there are numerous public incidents of aggression. Bar fights, outbursts. Isn't it true that your anger is uncontrollable?" Rachel objected. But the judge allowed Reed to continue. "Mr. Tyson, isn't it possible that your emotions have clouded your judgment? That perhaps you're overreacting to protect your daughter?" Mike's gaze locked onto Reed. His voice was low, but firm. "There's no overreacting when it comes to protecting your child." Reed's smug demeanor faltered. Mike's presence alone commanded respect and fear. After Mike's testimony, Rachel revealed her most damning evidence. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to present surveillance footage from Mr. Daniels's classroom." The screen flickered to life. The grainy footage showed Mr. Daniels standing too close to Lila, his hand lingering on her shoulder. His eyes watched her in a way that made every parent in the courtroom shift uncomfortably. Then came the audio. "You're my special girl, Lila," his voice whispered. "Stay a little longer. I can help you. No one has to know." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Even the most skeptical jurors could no longer deny the truth. Rachel's voice was unwavering. "This is not the behavior of a mentor. This is predatory." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed for comments. Mike shielded Elena and Lila from the flashing cameras. A journalist called out, "Mr. Tyson, what do you hope to accomplish through this trial?" Mike paused, his arm protectively around Lila. "Justice," he said simply. "Not just for my daughter, but for every child who's been failed by the system." The crowd hushed. There was no bravado, no outburst. Just a father fighting for what was right. The air inside the courtroom was heavy. The tension had built to its peak, and now it was time for both sides to make their final appeals. Rachel Porter stood tall, her voice calm but commanding as she faced the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this case is not simply about one teacher and one child. It's about a system that failed to listen. It's about the courage of a young girl, Lila Tyson, who stood up when no one else would. And it's about a father who did what every parent would, fought to protect his child." She paced slowly, making eye contact with each juror. "You've seen the evidence, the surveillance footage, the testimony of Lila, her parents, and the brave students who came forward. Mr. Daniels manipulated, intimidated, and harmed these children under the guise of mentorship. But the most damning evidence," she paused. "His own words." Rachel clicked a remote and the jury was once again forced to hear Mr. Daniels' voice. "You're my special girl, Lila. No one has to know." The room was silent, the weight of those words settling in. "No one has to know," Rachel repeated. "But now we all know, and it is your responsibility to ensure justice is served." She stepped back, giving the floor to Alan Reed. Alan Reed buttoned his Navy suit and approached the jury with an air of forced confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution has painted Mr. Daniels as a monster. But ask yourselves, is he truly that? Or is he a dedicated educator whose intentions were misconstrued?" He gestured dramatically. "You've heard of Mr. Tyson's past. A man with a well-documented temper. Could his bias and protective instincts have clouded his judgment? Could the emotions of a frightened child have distorted the truth?" Reed paused, feigning a moment of sincerity. "Mr. Daniels has served this community for years. Not a criminal, not a predator, Just a man who may have crossed boundaries unintentionally. He gave the jury a tight smile. I ask you to consider the possibility of doubt, and if there is even the slightest doubt, you must find him not guilty. The judge addressed the jury, her tone steady and formal. You are tasked with determining whether the defendant, Mr. Daniels, is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Consider the evidence, the testimonies, and the law. Court is now adjourned until you reach a verdict. The jury was escorted out. Lila clutched Mike's hand tightly. Elena sat on his other side, her face drawn but composed. There was nothing left to do but wait. Mike pulled Lila close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Whatever happens, baby, we did what was right. The courtroom was silent, save for the steady hum of the ceiling fan. Mike sat stiffly, his large hands clasped together. Lila's small fingers were intertwined with his, and Elena was on his other side, her face pale but resolute. Every breath felt like a struggle. The jury had been deliberating for over 7 hours. Each passing minute had gnawed at Mike's resolve. He wasn't a man who feared much in life, but waiting for strangers to determine the fate of his daughter's abuser was unbearable. Finally, the heavy oak doors creaked open. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, held a small piece of paper in her trembling hand. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Wilkins asked, her voice calm yet commanding. The foreman nodded. We have, Your Honor. The bailiff took the paper and handed it to the judge. She read it, her expression impassive. Then, she returned the slip to the foreman. Please read the verdict. The foreman cleared her throat, her voice slightly shaky. In the case of the State of New York versus Andrew Daniels, on the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant. She paused. Guilty. A collective exhale rippled through the room. But it wasn't over. On the charge of second-degree sexual misconduct, we find the defendant guilty. Mike's heart pounded. He gripped Lila's hand tighter. On the charge of attempted coercion of a minor, we find the defendant guilty. A stunned silence filled the courtroom, quickly followed by muffled sobs from the victims' families. Relief washed over Mike. He blinked rapidly, trying to compose himself as Lila buried her face in his chest. Elena leaned into them, tears streaming down her face. Justice, Mike whispered, his voice cracking. We did it, baby. We did it. Across the room, Mr. Daniels stood frozen, his face drained of color. His lawyer, Alan Reed, mumbled something to him, but Daniels barely reacted. The courtroom guards moved toward him, ready to take him into custody. This isn't fair, Daniels muttered, his voice trembling. I was a good teacher. I cared about those kids. Mike's eyes locked with Daniels for a brief moment, but this time there was no anger, just resolve. Caring doesn't mean control, Mike said quietly. And it sure as hell doesn't mean harm. The judge announced that the sentencing hearing would be held in 4 weeks. Daniels was led away in handcuffs, his head hanging low. The weight of his actions had finally caught up to him. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved forward, and voices called out for statements. But Mike shielded Lila with his broad frame, keeping her safe from the chaos. No statements today, Rachel Porter firmly told the press. The Tyson family has endured enough. Back at home, the tension still clung to the walls. Though they'd won, the emotional toll remained. Lila sat curled up on the couch, clutching her stuffed bear. Mike and Elena exchanged a look, silently agreeing. This wasn't the end of the healing process. It was just the beginning. You were so brave, baby, Mike said softly, kneeling in front of her. I'm proud of you. More than words can say. Lila gave him a small, tearful smile. You were brave too, Daddy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "We're gonna be okay," he whispered. "I promise." And for the first time in months, he believed it. The courtroom victory brought a sense of relief, but the days that followed were far from easy. The Tyson household remained quiet, the echoes of the past months lingering like shadows. Mike sat on the back porch, the early morning air still cool. He sipped his coffee, though the bitter taste did little to ease the tightness in his chest. The weight of everything, the trial, the media storm, Lila's pain, settled heavily on him. Lila was still struggling. Some nights, the nightmares came. Other nights, she stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, refusing to close her eyes. Mike had learned to wake at the faintest sound, rushing to her side whenever her cries broke the silence. Elena was strong, but Mike could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She carried the burden of keeping the family together, comforting Lila while pushing down her own fear and anger. A few days after the verdict, Lila had her first therapy appointment. Mike and Elena took her to a bright, welcoming office, the walls adorned with children's drawings. "Welcome, Lila," the therapist, Dr. Peterson, said softly. She was a middle-aged woman with a kind smile and gentle demeanor. "This is a safe space. You can talk about anything you want." Lila glanced at her parents, her small hands gripping the hem of her sweater. "It's okay, baby," Elena reassured her. "We're right here." Mike gave her a nod of encouragement. "You're strong, Lila. Stronger than you know." The session was slow, tentative. Lila spoke in fragments, her voice barely above a whisper. She described the fear, the confusion, and the guilt she had carried. But when she mentioned Mr. Daniels, her hands trembled. He said I was special," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "But it didn't feel right." Dr. Peterson nodded, her voice calm. "That's because it wasn't right, Lila. What he did was wrong. And it wasn't your fault." Mike clenched his jaw, holding back the surge of anger. But this wasn't the place for that. This was Lila's moment to heal. While the family focused on recovery, the outside world buzzed with reactions. News channels debated the case, and social media erupted with discussions. Some praised Mike for his relentless fight for justice, while others accused him of using his fame for personal gain. But Mike didn't care. He turned down most interview requests, only agreeing to one: a sit-down with journalist Angela Reed, a respected voice in investigative reporting. "I'm not doing this for attention," Mike said firmly during the interview. "I'm doing this because no child should go through what my daughter did. Schools need to be held accountable, and predators like Daniels shouldn't be able to hide behind their titles." Angela nodded, her expression sympathetic. "What do you hope comes from this?" Mike's voice was steady. "I want schools to listen when children speak up. I want stronger background checks. And I want every parent to know that their child's safety is worth fighting for." While Mike fought publicly, Elena fought in her own way. She joined a support group for mothers whose children had faced abuse. The shared stories were painful, but they also brought comfort. One evening, after Lila had gone to bed, Elena sat across from Mike at the kitchen table. "I've been thinking," she began, her hands curled around her mug of tea. "I want to start something. A foundation, maybe, for parents and kids. A place where they can get support, resources, legal help, whatever they need." Mike's eyes softened. "That's a beautiful idea. We can't undo what happened," she said, her voice trembling. "But we can make sure other families don't feel alone." Mike reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "We'll do it together." Days turned to weeks, and slowly, Lila began to find her light again. She returned to her art, her bedroom walls filling with vibrant drawings. One day, she surprised Mike with a new painting. It was a portrait of him, standing tall, his protective gaze shielding her from the shadows. At the bottom, in delicate letters, she had written, "My hero." Mike's eyes welled with tears as he pulled her into his arms. "No, baby," he whispered. "You're my hero." The air in the courtroom was heavy, thick with anticipation. The once crowded gallery now held a more subdued audience. Reporters, a few community members, and those directly involved in the case. Mike sat in the front row, Elena's hand clasped tightly in his. Lila, though still fearful of courtrooms, had opted to stay home with her grandmother. She didn't need to witness this part. Across the aisle, Daniels sat, his expression stoic. His once smug demeanor was gone, replaced with the vacant look of a man who had lost. Shackled and dressed in an orange jumpsuit, he barely resembled the polished teacher who once commanded a classroom. Judge Holloway entered, her presence commanding respect. After a brief pause, she addressed the court. "Mr. Daniels, this court has reviewed all the evidence, heard the testimonies, and considered the jury's verdict. You have been convicted of multiple counts of child exploitation, grooming, and abuse." The room remained eerily silent. "Your actions caused irreversible harm. You manipulated, coerced, and abused your position of power. This court finds no justification, no mitigating circumstances to lessen your sentence." Daniels' attorney shifted uncomfortably, but Daniels himself barely reacted. Judge Holloway's gaze hardened. "I sentence you to 40 years in state prison without the possibility of parole." A collective breath echoed through the room. Mike's fists clenched as a wave of relief washed over him. Daniels was led away, his shackles rattling with each step. But it wasn't victory that Mike felt. It was closure. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, their microphones and cameras eager for a statement. Mike, flanked by Elena and Detective Martinez, faced them. "Justice was served today," he began, his voice steady. "But this isn't just about my daughter. It's about every child who has ever been silenced. We fought for Lila, but there are so many others who don't get that chance." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Parents, trust your instincts, believe your children, and to the institutions that protect predators instead of the innocent, we see you, and we will hold you accountable." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement. Elena gave his hand a gentle squeeze, proud of his strength. "Thank you," Mike concluded, his voice firm, "for standing with us." With that, they walked away. Not as victims, but as a family determined to heal. Weeks passed, and slowly, the Tysons settled into a sense of normalcy. Lila returned to her art, spending hours drawing vibrant landscapes and whimsical creatures. Therapy helped her navigate the lingering fear, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined her. She even returned to school, transferring to a new district where she felt safer. One afternoon, she came home clutching a sealed envelope. "Daddy, look!" she beamed, handing it to Mike. He opened it to find a colorful flyer, a children's art contest hosted by a local community center. "I want to enter," she said, her eyes bright. "I'm ready." Mike knelt down, cupping her face gently. "I'm so proud of you, baby." Elena's idea for a foundation had blossomed. With Mike's support, the Lila Hope Foundation was established, offering resources for families navigating trauma and advocating for safer school environments. The grand opening event was held at a bustling community center, filled with laughter, music, and children's artwork. Lila's painting, a vivid depiction of a girl emerging from the shadows into the light, took center stage. Mike stood beside Elena, his heart swelling with pride. They had turned their pain into purpose. Late one evening, Mike stood on the balcony, gazing out at the city lights. The weight he had carried for so long had lifted, but the promise remained. A vow to protect his family no matter what. Lila joined him, her small hand slipping into his. "Daddy," she whispered. "Are we safe now?" Mike knelt down, his strong arms wrapping around her. Always, he said softly. You're safe, and I'll always fight for you. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, and for the first time in a long while, peace settled over the Tyson family. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let us know about your thoughts in the comment section. Also, subscribe the channel for daily stories notification.